I wasn't supposed to be on the schedule that night, but when the usual closer called out sick, they asked me to fill in at the fast food spot in downtown Miami. It wasn't anything special, just a standard chain restaurant with a drive-thru and a few booths inside. But something about that night felt off from the second I walked through the door. It was late, well past midnight, and the place was nearly deserted except for a couple of coworkers. The air was heavy with that greasy scent that stuck to everything, and the harsh overhead lights buzzed softly. I wiped down the counters, the swishing of the mop in the distance oddly calming, until a low noise from outside made me stop in my tracks. I glanced at the front window just as a dark car rolled slowly into the drive-thru. I didn't think much of it at first, but there was something strange about how slowly it crept toward the speaker. The voice that came through the intercom was rough and sluggish, like someone half awake and in a bad mood. The order itself was basic: 2 burgers, fries, and a drink, nothing out of the ordinary. But there was a strange urgency in his tone that sent a chill down my spine. Maybe it was just the late hour messing with me, but I couldn't shake the unease. I prepped the order, ignoring the knot forming in my stomach, and walked it over to the pickup window. The driver avoided eye contact. His hands were shaking, and the way he sat, rigid and tense, felt wrong. He shoved the cash at me without a word, took the bag, and when I handed him the change, that's when I saw it. For a split second, the car door cracked open, just wide enough for me to catch a glimpse of metal, definitely a weapon. My stomach lurched. I looked up at the driver again. He wasn't looking at me anymore, just staring straight ahead, motionless. Like he was waiting. For what, I didn't know. The door snapped shut, and my pulse spiked. I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe just a guy on edge. But as the car slowly rolled forward, I couldn't shake the sense that I had just missed something serious. I locked the window and turned away, trying to lose myself in the familiar sights and sounds: empty booths, flickering lights, the soft whir of the soda machine. The minutes dragged. Every second stretched longer than it should. Then a loud crash shattered the silence outside. I jumped, heart pounding, and looked out the window. The same car had come to a halt just past the drive-thru. Its engine was still idling. And now, someone was standing beside it. A tall figure, hoodie pulled low over his face. I froze. I couldn't tell if he was headed toward us or just loitering, but something about his presence screamed danger. I hesitated. Should I call someone? Step outside and ask if he was okay? Before I could decide, I heard a second voice, louder, angrier, shouting from the other side of the car. The hooded man looked around quickly and pulled something from his jacket. My chest tightened. He wasn't just standing around. He was moving with purpose, pacing anxiously. The shouting continued, fast and sharp. I couldn't make out the words, but things were escalating. Suddenly, the man stopped and turned toward the restaurant. I could see more of him now, barely, his face half hidden in the shadows. Then I saw it, something shiny in his hand. A gun. My blood went cold. I stumbled backward, thoughts racing. What now? Should I hide? Lock the doors? Before I could react, the back door slammed open and my manager, Andy, burst in, wide-eyed and frantic. Get to the back. Now, he hissed, grabbing my arm. They're robbing the place. My voice caught in my throat. What? Who? No answer. Andy pulled me down the hallway, away from the front, and I could still hear the voices outside growing louder. He shut the storage room door behind us, and for a moment everything felt frozen in time. We crouched behind stacks of frozen food, breath held, trying not to make a sound. My chest heaved. Every little noise felt like it echoed. Through a small window in the back, I could see shadows shifting across the parking lot. The deeper voice was still barking orders. The other man paced near the car, gun flashing in the dim light now and then. Andy leaned close, whispering urgently. We can't stay here. We've gotta go, through the alley. Out the back. But you need to stay quiet, okay? I nodded, too terrified to speak. My thoughts were spiraling. The idea of running out into the night felt just as terrifying, but staying put didn't seem any better. Then we heard footsteps. Right outside the door. A voice followed, flat and emotionless, "We know you're in there. Come out." My whole body tensed. Andy's grip on my arm tightened. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. The footsteps got closer, heavier, and the door handle jiggled. The metallic rattle felt deafening. My head was spinning, and I thought I might pass out. I could see the faint outline of someone through the gap beneath the door. They were listening, waiting for a sound. But we gave them nothing. I held my breath, eyes flicking to Andy. He pressed his hand over my mouth to keep me quiet. The robbers were still talking, more agitated now. It was only a matter of time before they came in. And then, sirens. That sharp wail cut through the air like a knife. My lungs caught, heart leaping. The police were close. The sound of screeching tires followed. Outside, the robbers' voices turned panicked. Andy tensed beside me, ready to bolt. But we stayed still. Listening. The footsteps retreated, then returned. And then, the storage room door flew open. Cold air swept in. A man stood in the doorway, face hidden in shadow, a gun raised. He wasn't yelling. Just breathing hard. Watching. Waiting. Maybe for a signal. Maybe trying to decide what to do. It was too much. Andy lunged. He hit the guy hard enough to knock him sideways, and in that instant, I bolted. I ran. Out the door, into the freezing air, down the alley. My legs burned, lungs screamed, but I didn't stop. Behind me, footsteps thundered. Sirens blared louder. I turned once, the robber was chasing me, but the flashing blue lights were nearly on us. I rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. 2 police cruisers blocked the street, officers already jumping out, weapons drawn. One of them tackled me before I could even explain, shouting commands I could barely process. The next moments were chaos. The robbers were caught not far from where I had stopped. Just like that, it was over. The police had made it in time. Nobody got away with anything. But sitting on the pavement, hands shaking, I realized something. It didn't feel over. The fear hadn't left me. The adrenaline faded, and all that remained was cold dread. We barely made it out. It had been too close. And something about those guys, the way they acted, the way they spoke, told me this wasn't just a random robbery. It felt like part of something darker. Something I still didn't understand. Back in 2022 I worked part-time for a company that cleaned out old commercial properties. You'd be surprised how many fast food places just get shut down and left to rot. One of my last jobs was at a shuttered chicken castle in Detroit. The building had been abandoned for months, maybe longer. My shift was always the kind of hours nobody really wanted. They paid extra for solo jobs and I took them. Less talking, more working. That place had no electricity except for a few emergency lights running on backup batteries. It was freezing inside and everything smelled like old grease and mildew. My boots stuck to the floor every few steps. I remember thinking how weird it was that the register drawers were still open, as if someone left in a rush. The front counter was covered in thick dust. I started in the kitchen, scrubbing down the fryers and pulling out rat traps. There were at least 4 dead ones, bloated, stiff, and smelling awful. I dumped them in a trash bag and turned to mop. But I heard a sound behind me, a low scrape, like a chair being dragged. There was no one else in the building. I stood completely still, trying to figure out if maybe something had shifted when I moved the traps. But the chairs in the dining area were stacked, and now one was on the floor. I was sure it hadn't been before. I walked out into the dining space and propped the chair back up. For a second I thought about texting my boss, but what would I even say? Ghosts knocked a chair over. I decided I was just tired and went back to mopping, trying not to look behind me too much. I was finally finishing up near the back hallway where the freezer and break room were. That part of the building always felt colder, even colder than outside. I remember seeing my breath in the air like it was winter. I wasn't dressed for that kind of cold. There was an old employee schedule still taped to the wall. The dates ended in early 2020, like they just never came back after COVID hit. A few names were crossed out with red ink, but one name, T. Willis, had a circle drawn around it with the word "stay" written next to it. I don't know why, but that made my stomach twist. It felt like I had read something I wasn't supposed to see. I stood there staring at it for a while, not moving. The silence in that hallway was heavier than before, like something was holding its breath. I went into the break room to take a quick breather, but the second I opened the door, I felt a wave of stale air hit me. It smelled like mold and something else I couldn't place, almost metallic. There was a small couch in the corner with a torn cushion, and someone had carved into the wall above it. The words were scratched deep, like with a key or a knife, "He never left." That's all it said. At first I laughed under my breath, thinking it was some edgy former worker trying to freak people out. But then I noticed how recent the carving looked. No dust had settled on it. I left the break room and decided to take trash bags out to the dumpster behind the building. The back door had a security bar across it, but it was already unlatched, wide open like someone had just stepped out. When I pushed the door open, the alley was dark and completely silent. The dumpster was only a few feet away, but I suddenly had this weird feeling like someone was already out there, watching. Not from the alley, closer. Like just behind the door I came through. I turned fast, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing. Still, I shut the back door and bolted it. I dumped the bags in the bin as quickly as I could and jogged back inside. I didn't even bother looking behind me again. When I came back into the kitchen, the mop bucket had been tipped over. Water ran across the floor in slow, lazy streaks, reflecting the dim red emergency light. No one else had keys to this place but me. My first thought wasn't ghost, it was someone else got in. I grabbed the handle of the mop and stayed quiet, listening. There was a sound coming from the front counter, slow tapping, like someone dragging their fingers across the surface one at a time. I crept forward, trying not to breathe too loud. When I peeked into the dining area, there was no one there. But all the chairs that had been stacked were now sitting on the floor, placed neatly around each table, as if the place had been set for customers who never showed up. I hadn't done that. No way. I didn't move for a long time. I was trying to rationalize it. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe a coworker came by. But deep down I already knew something wasn't right. That cold air I'd felt earlier, it was back. And this time it felt like it had weight. I was halfway to the front counter when I noticed the register screen had something typed on it. It wasn't a total or an order. It was a message. It said, "You forgot something." That's all. My hands went cold. I hadn't typed that. No one had. The keypad was still smudged from earlier, but the message was fresh. The machine wasn't even supposed to let you type random words like that. My heart started racing. I hit the power button and shut the whole thing off. I wanted this night to be over. That's when I remembered the guy from earlier, the one who got the wrong order and left. What if he came back and was hiding inside? Maybe he was trying to freak me out for revenge. But then why not show himself? Why go through all this silent creeping weirdness? I walked over to the front door to make sure it was still locked. It was. But when I looked out through the glass, I saw something across the street. A man, standing perfectly still in the shadow of a street lamp, facing the building. Not moving. Not blinking. I stared at him for a full minute, waiting for him to walk or wave or do anything. He didn't. I flipped the door's lock again out of pure instinct, even though it was already sealed. When I looked back out, he was gone. Just gone, like a blink, and vanished. I wanted to check the cameras in the office, so I rushed to the back. The little black and white monitor flickered, showing all 6 security feeds. Everything looked still, except for the freezer. On that camera, the door was cracked open and something was inside, just barely out of frame. I crept back to the kitchen and stood outside the freezer. The metal handle was icy cold, colder than it should have been. I pulled it open slowly. Inside were stacked boxes of frozen fries and patties. Nothing looked out of place. But then I saw the corner of a shirt sleeve. It was wedged between the boxes in the far back corner, as if someone had tried to bury it and gave up halfway. I reached out to move one of the boxes, but just then the freezer door slammed shut behind me. Hard. The light inside flickered once, and went out. I started kicking the door, shouting, but the steel muffled every sound. It was freezing. My breath came out in clouds, and I could barely see. Then from the darkness, I heard it. Footsteps on the slick freezer floor. Slow and heavy. Not running, just walking toward me. The door suddenly opened. I was gasping and shaking on the floor. There was no one there. Nothing. I sprinted out of the freezer, through the kitchen, and right out the front door. I didn't even bother to lock up. I just ran to my car and drove off. I didn't go back for my stuff. I didn't ask for my last paycheck. The manager called me once and left a voicemail asking if I was okay, but I never responded. I never imagined that working at a fast food place could have such an impact on my life. It was supposed to be just another job, nothing special. One of those late-night shifts where the minutes crawl by like they're stuck in place. I was on duty at a small burger joint in Nashville, Tennessee. It was my 3rd week on the job, and by that point, I had mostly gotten used to the rhythm, taking orders, cleaning counters, going through the motions. The place was unusually quiet that night. The kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. You could hear the soft buzz of the lights and the faint noise of traffic through the drive-thru speaker. I had just finished scrubbing down the fryer and was about to start wiping off tables when he walked in. He looked to be in his late 50s, wearing a bulky winter coat even though the weather wasn't cold. I didn't think much of it. I greeted him like I did everyone else. "What can I get you tonight?" My voice was tired, but polite. He didn't reply immediately, just stood there, staring up at the menu like he wasn't really seeing it. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at it, like his mind was somewhere else. Eventually, he met my eyes. They were empty, distant. "Just a small fry," he said. His voice was rough, dry, like he hadn't spoken in days. He handed me a crumpled dollar, and I rang up the order. Nothing seemed too strange at that point. I gave him his change, but then I noticed his hand. It was shaking. Not just a light tremble, it was trembling hard, like he was struggling to control it. I figured maybe he was nervous or cold, so I brushed it off. He took the fries, walked over to a booth in the corner, and sat down. Everything seemed normal, except he kept glancing over his shoulder like he was expecting someone. He didn't touch the fries. Just sat there. Watching. Waiting. I tried to keep working, but I kept checking on him. Something felt off. About 20 minutes later, he suddenly stood up, panic in his face. He clutched at his throat. My heart sank. I thought he was choking. His eyes widened, full of fear, and he tried to speak, but nothing came out. He clawed at his neck, gasping, but silent. I froze for a second. This wasn't like any choking I'd ever seen. It felt different. More violent. More, wrong. I rushed over to help, but before I could reach him, his body jolted and collapsed onto the table with a sickening crack. His breathing was shallow, labored, like something was forcing the air out of his lungs. I stood there, stunned. Time seemed to crawl. He was still alive, but barely. His eyes were open, staring blankly, like he was seeing something I couldn't. My hands shook as I reached for the phone to call 911. But then I noticed something strange. The fries he'd ordered were gone. I hadn't seen him eat. I knew he hadn't touched them. But they had vanished. My brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe I looked away. Maybe he ate them fast. But I didn't believe that. I'd been watching him. Then I heard a faint noise behind me. I spun around. Nobody was there. The restaurant was empty, except for me and the man. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was in the room with us. I turned back toward him. His body had gone limp. His face, it looked almost calm. Like he had been waiting for something. Or someone. I managed to dial for help, but by the time paramedics got there, he was gone. The strange part? They found no reason for his death. No food in his airway. No signs of a heart attack. It was like, he just died. Quietly, mysteriously. Right there in a corner booth. Months have passed, but I still think about that night. His vacant stare still haunts me. I can't explain it. I just know I missed something. Something invisible. Unseen. A presence in the air that night, watching, waiting. I never went back to that job. Couldn't bring myself to. Even now, when I walk past that building, I swear I feel eyes on me from inside. That night changed everything I thought I understood. The world felt different afterward, darker, heavier. Like a veil had been lifted, just for a moment. The days following were a blur. My mind kept replaying the scene, twisting it each time. I couldn't stop thinking, what had I missed? I avoided the place completely, but the thought of that booth, that man, never left me. Then, about a week later, my old boss called. Said he needed to talk. I didn't want to go back, but curiosity got the better of me. When I walked in, the familiar scent of grease and stale air hit me like a wall. My boss looked pale, nervous. He handed me a folder and told me I needed to see it. Inside was a police report. The man's name was Charles Kessler. A regular, apparently. Been coming in for years. But what shook me was that the autopsy found nothing. No blockage. No medical cause of death. My boss said something else. That Charles had been acting strange before I started working there, staring at his food, muttering, always looking behind him. Some people claimed he was talking to someone who wasn't there. The more I listened, the more uncomfortable I became. Charles had been obsessed with something. Following something. My boss told me there had been other strange incidents at the restaurant. Murmurs. Rumors. A curse, maybe. A history. Turns out, the restaurant was built on the site of an old warehouse that had burned down decades ago. No one really knew why. Some said it was cursed. The more I heard, the more I felt like what happened to me was part of something much larger, something ancient and waiting. Days passed. I tried to put it behind me, but the feeling never went away. Then I got another call, this time from a woman claiming to be Charles Kessler's daughter. She told me he had been behaving oddly before his death, fixated on the restaurant. She wanted to know if I had seen anything unusual. I told her everything. I had no answers, but I could hear the desperation in her voice. About a week after that, the police contacted me again. They'd found something strange, a hidden compartment in the storage room. Inside were handwritten notes, odd trinkets, and among them, a black stone. Smooth, cold, marked with strange symbols no one could decipher. It was the last thing recovered before they shut the place down. That was the last I heard. The restaurant eventually closed for good. The building was redeveloped, turned into something else. But I still think about it. About Charles. About the stone. And every now and then, when I drive by, I wonder. What if it's not over? What if it's just waiting?